welcome to the Bread Kitchen. This is the first of a series of short videos about the basics of making bread at home. Now, many people are interested in making their own bread, but they think that it's hard or it's time consuming. In fact, it's neither. And bread making is one of those things that the more you do, the better you get. It's a bit like riding a bicycle, really. I'm going to start with looking at some very simple equipment that you need, which you probably already have, to make your own delicious homemade bread. So here's the first set of stuff that's really quite useful for making bread. First of all, I've got a nice big bowl for mixing dough in. This happens to be plastic, it's very cheap. Now, I like plastic mixing bowls, mainly because if I'm making a thin batter, if I'm going to make crumpets or blinis, say, then I can get a metal whisk in there or my electric whisk and not worry about scratching the bowl. I've also got here a 2 litre or 4 pint glass bowl. This is the bowl that I'll use to allow my dough to rise, and for a typical loaf, once the dough has risen, it'll just about fill this bowl. I've then got some measuring devices, measuring spoons and cups. In reality, for bread making, I only use a tablespoon, a teaspoon and a half teaspoon measure. For larger quantities than that, I much prefer to weigh things, and I'll show you something in a minute that might surprise you. I've then got a nice little tea strainer. This is really handy for sifting flour onto a surface if you're going to knead dough on it. And this is a 99p plastic scraper. It's brilliant for scooping dough out of bowls or scraping sticky doughs off your surface. Well worth investing in one. If your local supermarket or hardware store doesn't have them, you can buy them online. Now, the last thing on the table is a rolling pin. Mine's about 18 inches long, solid beech, really useful for when you're making pastries. Next on the list is a decent set of kitchen scales. Part of the success of good bread making is the accurate measurement of your ingredients, and a good set of scales will achieve that for you. Now, scales can vary in price, but if somebody asks you what you want for your birthday, you know the answer. Next, I've got a series of loaf tins that I've collected over the years. This is a 2 pint loaf tin, 1 litre. This is a 1.5 litre or 6 cup loaf tin, and this one is usually called a sandwich tin or a Pullman loaf tin. It's got lovely square sides and I'll give you a nice shaped loaf. Again, you can buy these online, usually around about $15, but well worth investing in if you're going to make bread regularly. Baking trays are very useful if you're going to make buns or rolls, or any time that you're going to make a loaf which doesn't require the use of a loaf tin, like a braided loaf or a rustic looking loaf as in a granary cob. Having 2 trays is handy, particularly when you're making buns and rolls, because it's so easy to fill up one tray very quickly. Now, the last thing on my list is a roll of big plastic bags. I find these are tremendous, particularly if you've got trays of buns that you want to prove, because you can put the whole tray in, and providing you get enough air inside the bag, you can be sure that the buns are never going to stick to the plastic. Now, some of you will be asking why I haven't included a measuring jug. So let me show you why. Here I've got my 500ml measuring jug. Buy these in most supermarkets and general stores, and I'm going to add in 300 grams of water. Okay, that'll do nicely. Now, rather conveniently, 1 gram of water has a volume of 1 ml. Now, this is the 300 millilitre mark on my measuring jug, but this is the volume that's actually measured by this jug. It's a little bit less than 300 millilitres. So let's add a bit more water. This time the measuring jug is measuring 300 mils, but there's actually 320 mils in there. Now, you might say, well, that's only 20 mils in 300, it's not going to make that much difference, is it? You'd be surprised. As I said at the beginning, one of the keys to success is the accurate measurement of your ingredients, and you'd actually need an extra 30 grams of flour in a typical loaf to mop up all that extra moisture. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a very sloppy dough that's difficult to work with. So here's my number 1 top tip in this video. Don't measure your wet ingredients by volume, measure them by mass. In the next video in this series, I'll be talking about wheat flours, those that you can use for bread making and the ones that you should definitely avoid. Thanks for watching, and do join me next time in the Bread Kitchen.